Welcome back to the S&T Football Podcast. It is officially the off season for all of you college football fans out there. So we are going to be talking about things outside of the games on the field that have to deal with the college football and also the NFL realm. One of the more interesting topics that I like to pay attention to every off season for college football is the teams moving around, conference realignment. And also, every year we kind of see jumps from the FCS level to the FBS level, the football championship subdivision, Division I FCS, as we know, and then the Division I FBS, which is the college football world that we, most of us live in. There's always a couple teams each year that move up to that next level, make the jump up to the bigger Division I level. So, it's always very interesting to keep track of those new transitions and of the changes with the conferences and different teams that are added to, the teams that we, know and that we pay attention to through the Power Four and also the Group of Six conferences. So in this episode, we're going to get into the changes that we're going to see here in 2026 for the upcoming season. And, there's a few changes, some interesting things going on, especially with the couple teams that we're going to see jump up to the FBS level. So we're going to get into all that. So let me start with that right there. So in 2026, we're going to add two more teams to the FBS level, those teams being North Dakota State and Sacramento State. The North Dakota State Bison and the Sacramento State Hornets are both making the transition up to the FBS level. Many of us are already aware of North Dakota State. Many college football fans have definitely heard of this school before because they are a powerhouse at the FCS level. They have been for a very long time now. Definitely in the past couple decades, in the last 20 years, they have absolutely dominated their level of college football. I believe they've won about 15 of the last 20 FCS national championships. So literally just a dominant powerhouse, a school that has been running the FCS level for quite some time now. Down there in Fargo, North Dakota, they are a really good team. They've produced some NFL talent over the years as well. A couple names that come to mind, Carson Wentz and also Trey Lance, even though their NFL careers may have not turned out so great. Those are the two names that come to mind that they have produced in the last few years. So, a pretty good school, a pretty good football program. It's very interesting, though, because the conversation has come up before around North Dakota State because in the past, people have questioned why they have not made the jump up to the FBS level sooner because, we've seen teams in the last decade or two do it every single year. Some names that we can go through, some schools that have made that jump in the last few recently in the last few years. James Madison, you have Jacksonville State, you have Kennesaw State, you have Delaware, you have Sam Houston. Some other teams recently would be Charlotte and Georgia Southern and Georgia State and teams like that have made the transition from the FCS to the FBS level. Liberty as well, schools like that. So you would think that with how well North Dakota State has performed at that level, that they would have also been one of those teams to make that transition. I just remember a couple years back, I was kind of looking into it, and I believe it was just a lot of it always comes down to, the TV deals and, partners and the schools trying to get, their brand deals with the different companies and whatnot. It always comes down to the money and the politics of college football. So I guess that's why North Dakota State themselves have not made that jump up sooner, maybe with just how good that school has performed at that level. They didn't want to, take a deal that they thought was, beneath them or, they thought was not fair to them. So maybe they just decided that what was best for their school in the meantime was to stay at that level and continue to dominate. Well, finally, in 2026, they have decided to go ahead and make the jump up to FBS. So they're leaving their dominance behind and they're going to join the college football world that we all know and love. and try to battle for a Group of Six playoff spot with the rest of the Group of Six conferences. So very cool to see North Dakota State finally join the FBS level and finally going to be a team that, we're going to be paying attention to every single week and things like that. They are joining the Mountain West Conference, which makes a lot of sense for them, geographically, of course, being up there in North Dakota. They're definitely in the middle of a lot of those Mountain West teams up there, teams like, well, actually, we'll get into it because a lot of teams are moving away from the Mountain West to the Pac-12. Teams like Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State, they are moving over from the Mountain West to the Pac-12, and I'm definitely going to dive into that a little bit more. But North Dakota State will be replacing a couple of those teams, moving to the Mountain West. So they're going to be right there geographically, but also I think that's a good move for them because they're not, jumping up to a Power Four conference, immediately. I don't think that's something they would probably do anyway. That's not really common for teams that are just making that transition. But I think coming to the Mountain West, that's definitely a conference that they can hang in, especially with a lot of the best teams that were running the Mountain West before. Like I said, Boise State, San Diego State, they're moving to the Pac-12. So that kind of leaves a void for North Dakota State to kind of come in, and I think that's a good move for them. I think they could continue to have some success at the FBS level coming into the new Mountain West. So definitely interesting to see that for them. And also on the other side, we have Sacramento State coming over from FCS to the FBS. They are making the jump up to the MAC. Sacramento State is joining the MAC, which is very interesting because geographically that does not make sense for them. For Sacramento State, it's the opposite. It does not make geographical sense for them because Sacramento is in California, which is, all the way on the West Coast, yet you're joining the MAC conference, Middle America Conference, with teams like, Ohio and Toledo and Akron and Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, teams like that. So playing in that conference is definitely very interesting why they would join that conference. Definitely would have made more sense for them to join the Mountain West alongside North Dakota State, San Diego State, San Jose State, teams that were in the Mountain West. That would have made more sense for Sacramento State. Well, they joined the MAC, so that's going to be interesting for them because it's going to be a lot of travel time going from California to states like Ohio and Michigan and Illinois to play football, and then having to go back home again, have them come to you. So very interesting for them, and that's been one of the biggest talking points around this move was just the fact that it doesn't really make sense for them with the travel time. It's going to be a lot, and Sacramento State also took a pretty bad deal with the MAC. They paid a lot of money to join this conference, and also they forfeited some really big things. Like, of course they're not going to be bowl eligible for the first season. That's a standard for FBS, but also that in their own conference, I think they forfeited like TV money for like the next decade or something like that. It's really crazy, the situation, but I guess they were just really eager to join the FBS because they took a pretty bad deal. I think it's really the opposite of North Dakota State. North Dakota State kind of, they waited it out. They made sure that they had the deal on the table that they wanted, and then they went ahead and made that move finally after a long time. Versus Sacramento State, they also were having a lot of success at the FCS level, so it's not like they weren't doing well, but just kind of out of nowhere, I don't think anybody really expected them to make that jump up, maybe quite yet. And then they're also taking a bad deal as opposed to North Dakota State. So very interesting moves there. I think the Sacramento State move to the MAC is kind of less of a factor than North Dakota State. I don't really see Sacramento State doing too much. I'm sure they're a very good football program, but going to the MAC is not super, the MAC is not a super competitive. Well, I mean, they're competitive amongst each other, but when it comes to, making a push for the playoff or, anything like that, being on the national stage, the MAC is not really there. They're usually not a contender from that conference. So going to that conference, I'm sure they will probably just join the mediocrity, but maybe they'll stand out. Maybe they'll stand out in that conference, with it being a little weaker. But I think North Dakota State will definitely make a more immediate splash when it comes to the college football landscape, I would say. So very interesting moves to see there. And then conference realignment. Let's get into conference realignment, because that's also very interesting this year. So like I said before, I touched on it earlier, the Pac-12 is back. Yes, the Pac-12 has, I guess, kind of rebranded itself after, of course, we all know the Pac-12, the once glorious conference that we all knew with Oregon and Washington and USC and teams like that. They broke up, disbanded a couple seasons ago now. And, of course, we saw all those teams basically jump to new conferences. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA all joined the Big Ten. You had teams like Cal and Stanford join the ACC. Had Arizona State, Utah, Arizona, Colorado joined the Big 12. And then basically Oregon State and Washington State kind of got left behind. We're holding down the Pac-12 by themselves for the last couple seasons, and they've basically just fell out of relevancy. Well, I guess the past couple seasons, they stayed down, but they were able to at least stay alive, and I guess that kind of helped them rebuild themselves, because they are now back. They have some new teams in their conference. Unfortunately, the standard of the conference definitely has not recovered, so it's not like it's the same power conference that we once knew before. They have added some new teams from the group of 6. You have teams like Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State, Fresno State, Colorado State, all joining the Pac-12. But all those teams, of course, are from the Mountain West originally. So, it's basically still a group of 6 conference. You add Oregon State and Washington State as well. But, of course, those two teams have definitely not done well ever since the Pac-12 disbanded. So this is still a pretty group of 6 level type conference. It's basically the Mountain West 2.0, but, it's the new Pac-12. So we'll see with the Pac-12. We'll see if this new conference, puts out some teams that, could be contenders for the playoff or whatnot. Also, Texas State is joining from the Sun Belt, which is interesting. Texas State joining that fray. I think they're kind of the weakest team out of all of those, so it's probably going to be a tough time for them, but should be interesting. Interesting why North Dakota State did not join the Pac-12. North Dakota State could have easily joined the Pac-12 with how the Pac-12 is now. Is basically just Mountain West teams that moved over. So I think they definitely could have do it. Another thought is that the Pac-12 and the Mountain West could have just combined and just became one conference. I mean, it's basically the same teams anyway, so why have Mountain West teams move over to the Pac-12 and then have new teams move to the Mountain West? Why not just make one conference together? I don't know. But a lot of interesting things going on with the Pac-12 and them being back, so we'll see if that's a factor in the college football world at all next season. But like I said, the Mountain West loses 5 teams to the Pac-12, but they do add UTEP and Northern Illinois out of the MAC, which is interesting. Northern Illinois, the lone MAC team leaving, going to the Mountain West. And then Hawaii was already a member, but I guess they joined in other schools or other sports as well. And then North Dakota State, like I said before. So the Mountain West is going to be interesting next season. Definitely lost most of their, I would say, contenders, when it comes to the playoff and things like that. Boise State, San Diego State, those are definitely some big losses for the Mountain West. So Mountain West definitely took a punch with losing, those teams. But, still a group of 6 conference anyway. So, we'll see if they hang around. Conference USA, Louisiana Tech leaves for the Sun Belt, but UTEP, Conference USA, loses Louisiana Tech and UTEP. So they lose 2 teams to 2 different conferences. UTEP moves to the Mountain West and Louisiana Tech moves to the Sun Belt. And then the Sun Belt basically gains Louisiana Tech while losing Texas State to the Pac. A few interesting moves going on, mostly with the group of 6 conferences. And, that's definitely something we talk about a lot because, the playoff still includes one Group of 6 team, even with the changes that the committee decided to make at the beginning of the year. They still included the Group of 6 playoff spot. So, still relevant when it comes to the playoff. We're still going to have at least one team come out of one of those conferences. And with all the movement around, and especially adding North Dakota State, which, the powerhouse that they were as a FCS school, could definitely make some noise when it comes to the Group of 6 race. So, going to be very interesting to see what goes on. I'm very interested to see how the Pac-12 performs next season. If they end up just being another Group of 6 conference, or if they kind of step up their game and outperform themselves, with the, I don't know, with the brand behind them maybe of the Pac-12. They kind of resurrect things. So remains to be seen. Very interesting, the kind of dynamics that we're going to have next season. But anyways, what do you think about the new changes to the FBS this upcoming season? What do you think about the new teams that we've added in the conference realignment for 2026? Drop your comments below, drop your thoughts, and give this video a like. Thank you very much for watching the S&T Football Podcast, and we'll see you next time.